Injuries like torn ACLs, ruptured Achilles tendons, and broken bones can certainly change the course of a player's season and alter their career, but whenever we talk about injuries that have the potential for someone to actually lose a piece of their body, that's when I think we've reached a whole nother level of severity. Welcome back everyone to your #1 source for learning about everything related to sports injuries and sports medicine news. In this video, we're going to talk about an injury that we've never discussed before on this channel, and one that I think could certainly be the most severe that we've seen in this NBA season. Scroll down to the comments here, type in what you think I'm going to discuss here in the video. Make sure and go subscribe as always if you like this type of content and want to stay up to date with my future videos. And now let's get started talking about Rui Hachimura's groin injury. This type of injury can result in the player losing one of their testicles, and that's why I think this could be one of the most severe injuries we've seen this season. It's been a month since Hachimura was first inadvertently kicked in the groin by one of his teammates back in mid-December. He's given us an interview update saying that he's recovering well and worked towards getting back on the court after undergoing a minor procedure, and now there's concern that he might not even return before February, making this injury at least a 6-week absence. Shots to the groin like this are a real risk in pretty much any sport. The potential they can have for making you lose one of your testicles is why whenever we're growing up and playing t-ball and sports like that, we're instructed to wear a protective cup. We don't know the specifics of Hachimura's injury, but certainly the fact that he's been out for so long suggests that this was more than just your routine kick to the groin. Some of the more severe injuries we can see involving the groin are things like testicular ruptures, fractures, testicular dislocations, something called a hematocele, and then even just a simple contusion to the scrotum. Depending on the severity, if these are not acted on and corrected quickly enough, they can result in loss of the testicle. In simple terms, think of the testicle as a ball of tissue that's surrounded by multiple different layers. Inside the testicle are the seminiferous tubules where sperm production occurs. The sperm then travel through different structures called the epididymis, and then go up into something called the vas deferens up through the spermatocord. Whenever we're developing, the testicles actually originate up in the abdomen and then go and extend down out into the scrotum, leaving the body. So all these layers that surround the testicle actually are analogous to layers in the abdomen. We even have a muscle that helps to elevate the testicles called the cremaster muscle, and this is actually originating from one of the obliques. So as we're developing, the testicle pushes through all these different abdominal layers of muscle and tissue that then end up covering the testicle and supporting its function down in the scrotum. Whenever we see a serious testicle injury, a lot of times it's because it's been forced up and compressed against either the thigh or a specific bone called the pubic bone. Most likely here, when we look back at Hachimura getting kicked, that's actually causing compression between the other player's leg, compressing the testicle either up against Hachimura's thigh or up against the bone called the pubis. The first of these injuries we'll talk about is a hematocele. A hematocele is a collection of blood in between the layers called the tunica vaginalis. There's a parietal and a visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis, and whenever we have a hematocele, there's blood that collects within this area. That can lead to a lot of swelling and pain within the scrotum that sometimes has to be surgically drained to remove that blood. The next and probably worst of these possible injuries is a testicular rupture. This occurs whenever there's been so much force directed against the testicle that it causes a tear in that innermost layer guarding the tissue of the testicle called the tunica albuginea. You then have kind of extravasation of that testicular tissue out into the scrotum, and this is a true emergency situation. Similar to this injury, a testicular fracture occurs whenever there's been some disruption in the tissue of the testicle, but no break in that covering layer, and so there's no contents of the testicle that are sort of extravasating out. A testicular dislocation occurs whenever the testicle gets moved from out of the scrotum, typically up inside the abdominal cavity where it originated. These most often happen with like a saddle injury where you're riding a bike or on a horse, and just that pressure up underneath the testicle can cause it to dislocate up into the abdomen. The final serious injury to discuss here is something called testicular torsion. Torsion, of course, means twisting, and so this is whenever the testicle and its structures get twisted in a way that strangulate and cut off the blood supply to the testicle. The spermatocord is a collection of blood vessels and the vas deferens that help supply nutrients and oxygen to the testicle and then help deliver sperm. If the testicles get twisted, either from trauma or sometimes just for incidental reasons, you twist those blood vessels and you strangulate and cut off that blood flow to the testicle. This is another emergency type of situation where as soon as possible, You want to get seen by a doctor so that they can untwist the testicles and restore that blood flow. Now, we don't know specifically what the injury was to Hachimura, but the fact that he's been out for so long tells me that it was probably a pretty substantial type of injury. The most common step to evaluating any of these injuries is actually doing an ultrasound scan. We don't really do CT scans, x-rays, or MRIs of the testicles. Ultrasound is the way to go. The testicle is really superficial and close to the skin, so it's really easy to see under ultrasound, and then you can evaluate to determine if there's been something like a fracture, a dislocation, or even a rupture, or like a hematocele. If the ultrasound shows any possible, even slight concern for a rupture or damage to the testicle itself, then you have to undergo surgery to explore that contents and see what's there. For a testicular rupture, what they'll try to do is put that tissue, if it's salvageable, back contained in the testicle and then re-sew up that outer layer to give it back that protective lining. But sometimes they have to remove any part of the tissue that's no longer viable. The worst case scenario with these is, of course, having tissue that can't survive. And if tissue can't survive, it dies, it gets necrotic, and then it becomes infected. So that means they have to actually remove the testicle, a procedure called an orchiectomy. Now, reassuringly, you can still have children and be fertile with just one testicle. But you can imagine then the additional pressure to avoid these future injuries if you have a solitary testicle. We heard Hachimura himself talk about how he's going to look into wearing some sort of protective gear or equipment to avoid a future injury like this. Finally, what could this minor procedure have been that Hachimura underwent? There's a lot of different possibilities here, ranging from anything like draining the blood from a hematocele to doing a procedure to untwist any sort of torsion that might have been there, all the way to what would kind of be the worst case scenario in actually having to remove one of the testicles. Reassuringly though, they can be saved the majority of the time. Even with a ruptured testicle, it can be salvaged 90% of the time if surgery is done within 72 hours. If you have testicular torsion, damage to that testicle can occur within just 4 to 6 hours. And so these are truly emergency types of situations whenever we see these bad groin injuries. So we may never know what the specific injury was to Hachimura and what that specific surgery was, but hopefully this review of these types of injuries gives you a sense of why I think this really could be one of the most severe injuries of the season. Let me know any questions or comments you guys have below. I hope as always you learned something from watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.